Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor. I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. Now, today I kind of wanted to go over something that's been brought to me by like four people in the last week or so, and that's interviews and interview questions. And I understand that this is something that can be tough, and I've kind of touched on interviews and things in a couple of places in the past when I've been talking about kind of work or business or kind of getting into a job and all that kind of thing. And as a result, it's something that's always stood out to me because I've made some mistakes in interviews. I've always kind of followed the same procedure but made tweaks to it. But then on top of that, being on the other side of the desk, being the person interviewing people, there are like some specific things like key pointers and stuff that people say, especially when I'm listening the way that I would listen as a coach, and I'm paying like very close attention to how people are saying things and what people are trying to put across relative to what I want them to put across. That I don't know. I just wanted to share with you guys because I've had a good number of people the last week, friends, family, and whatever else, discussing interviews with me, and sometimes people seem to have a very relaxed kind of attitude towards them, and some people have an awful lot of anxiety and worry around them. And so, as a result, I wanted to bring to you guys kind of what I do, what I would do in preparation for an interview, but then also I wanted to go through kind of the 10 most common questions that I've got on some of my old interview sheets and forms and things like that that are across every single one of them, and so there's a good chance that you're going to be asked some of these. And there are about, I think there are 10, 9, 10, something like that. I've got them all written down. We'll go through those in a minute. But first off, the most important thing about an interview, to keep in mind going into one when you get offered one, is that you've got two big parts of preparation to do, and then you've got one thing to keep in mind. So first off, let's talk about the preparation because that's the easy stuff. So the preparation, first off, if you get offered a job that you've applied for, if you get, even if you've been headhunted, whatever, the first thing to do, research who's asking you to work for them, the kind of job that you'd be expected to do, and if you really want to kind of shine a little bit, maybe look into the rest of the industry, how the industry interacts, any big news from that industry in a while. You know, if you're going into a pharmaceuticals industry as a graduate or something like that, having a look at any large news stories around who's been buying what, any big scandals, any other things that have been going on, especially some of the things that maybe are more specialized news, like very specific industry news, just so it seems like you've been paying attention to where you want to go. Now, the second thing is by far the more important thing than, in my opinion, although that research and making it seem like you know what you're talking about can not be undervalued. But the second part is you need to prepare your answers and the way that the examples that you've got and the way that you're going to communicate those. And we'll go through those when we get onto each question, in regards to kind of how you should prepare an answer. Like I usually, for a lot of these answers a lot of these questions rather, that I get asked a lot or have been asked a lot in interviews, in my mind I'll have two examples of each, so that if someone goes, okay, well that's one example, can you give us another one? Then, you know, it happens every so often. There's always that one time where it's like, oh, well, that example that they've just given sounds very similar to everybody else's. Let's see if he's got something else that he can distinguish himself from others with. And so it's always worth having two, maybe three, if you want to really prepare, if it's a very general question, that you've got more examples to use and to draw from. Then it's definitely worth kind of keeping a little supply of them there to kind of work with it. But anyway, that last thing that you need to keep in mind, and this is just something in your head, and it can be hard to keep it in your head, especially if you're very stressed out or if you're very, very happy. You aren't there to be judged. Yeah, that's the first thing. Yeah, they are opening their doors to you to see how you're doing, if you would fit with them. That doesn't mean that you leave with a black mark on you just because they don't want you on their team. That just means that you remain in your neutral state. Getting the job would be a positive state. Getting arrested on leaving the interview, that'd be a negative state. Leaving and not hearing from them again, or leaving and getting an email or a letter later on saying that unfortunately they won't be bringing you forward into the next part of the interviewing process, or they don't want to hire you, that's just leaving you where you are. It might not be helpful, but it's not bad. And then carrying on from that, you're not there to make friends. You're there to sell yourself. You're a product. Being overly familiar can sometimes cost you the interview as easily as being standoffish and silent. You're there to be professional. You're there to show what you're offering to a team. You're there to sell yourself as a product for them to take on board. Don't try and make friends with those people. Friendship and getting to know them as people and colleagues and all that kind of thing will either come very, afterwards, or let them make friends with you. There have been at least 2 interviews that I've had where the person that was interviewing me wanted to make friends with me. One, by trying to ignore professionalism and poke into parts of my life that really had nothing to do with the interview that I was going for, and the other, by allowing me to basically say, yes, I'm qualified for this job, and then he spent the rest of the interview talking to me, like at me. And so as a result, that was fine. I didn't get the first job because I feel I dodged a bullet there by avoiding a very unprofessional boss, and the second one I got the job pretty much straight away because he seemed to like me as soon as I said yes, I can do the job, at which point then he decided to try and become my friend. That was his decision. He was the interviewer. He had bought the product early on. That was his decision. You're there to be the product. You're there to sell the product. That's it. Don't try and make friends. Don't try and keep people too far away. They have to be involved and engaged with you, but they don't have to, you don't have to try and be their best friend within the half-hour interview that you've got. Anyway, let's move on to these questions. Now, how should you talk in an interview? Because that's kind of important. How should you present yourself? Also important. In terms of appearance, lots of people say, oh, well, you need a suit and you need a... No. You need to be presentable. If you're turning up for a job at a warehouse, for instance, then turning up in a button-down shirt with a tie, clean shoes, and all the rest of it, probably appreciated. If you're turning up for a job at an office, then yeah, they'd probably appreciate you wearing a suit because that would be what you'd be wearing anyway. But again, if the sun is beating down outside, no one will fault you for turning up maybe either without a tie or without a jacket. If the better bet there, in my opinion, is turning up without a jacket and keeping the tie. But read the situation, have a chat with the people. The next thing is when it comes to actually talking to the people, try and be positive. Soften your facial expression. Smile when you can. Obviously, not all the time. Don't grin. Sit there grinning the whole time. Don't keep. Eye contact is important, but don't glare at people across the table. And just try and speak clearly. If you're feeling a bit nervous and you're getting a little bit of dry mouth and all the rest of it, your lips are sticking together, your tongue just doesn't know what it's doing, just ask if it would be okay if you brought a glass of water in with you. Just a little cup from a water cooler or something like that, just to sip at, just to keep your mouth kind of mobile and functional whilst you're talking throughout the whole thing. So let's go through these questions then. The first question, and this is I'm not going to go through these in order of that they would be asked during an interview, but I'm just going to go through them in any which order. But this is usually the question that ends the interview, and that is, have you got any questions? This isn't a question that's just asked out of niceness. This is a question that is usually asked as a kind of very sneaky question that everyone's just like, oh, the interview's over now because they've said they're done. It'll usually be a case of, okay, well, I think we've covered everything. I think that's everything we need from you. Is there anything you'd like to ask us? And it's a case of then everyone relaxes. And everyone goes, oh yeah, oh no, I don't want to ask anything. Or, oh yeah, I've got these questions. And it's like, okay, sure, fine. Let's hear the questions. If you've got a question about holiday or pensions or things like that, then sure, ask that. But keep it brief, allow it to just be a bit of a quick fire thing. But also, more importantly, they want to know that you're engaged with it. So when you're asking these questions, the interviewer is more likely to be looking for something in regards to kind of areas that you're interested in the work that they haven't been able to find or touch on. Whoops, smacking my microphone. They haven't been able to find or touch on during their interview. And so asking about training opportunities, promotional opportunities, average work day. Yeah. Would it be that you would always be working as part of a team, or would there be times when you would have to work individually? Asking those questions to engage with what's going on. And again, probably a good idea to sit down and just have maybe 2-3 questions, a mix of questions that actually kind of, if it hasn't been brought up already, asking about holidays, asking about pensions and things like that, whatever else. Those are other benefits, uniform bits and pieces, whatever. Those are probably questions that you need to ask, but at the same time have like some other questions that maybe you don't even really care about, but it's worth asking. Can I just double check, or can I just ask about what my normal working day would be like? Because potentially that's something that they may feel is very standard, but not something that you are completely aware of. Could you tell me, I understand that this is a mid-level job or an entry-level job or whatever else, but could you tell me about any opportunities that there might be for training or career development? That's one that people love, because that question suggests that you want to stay there for a while to advance, and if they can offer that to you, then that's more of an incentive for you to be there, and so they are more likely, if they like you anyway, that's going to be a question that kind of nails it for you, where it's like, oh, well, this person wants to stick around to develop themselves. So that might mean that they want to move on, but that might mean that they're long term in the company. If they do well, then it makes us look good. So, the have you got any questions question is still a question in the interview. Don't treat it like the end. It's not it's like any other kind of race. You're not going for the finish line, you're going for 10 yards out the other side. And 10 yards out the other side of an interview is when you're out the door, down the road in Starbucks, grabbing yourself a celebratory coffee for getting through it. The next one, and this is one that I've slipped up on in the past, and that is, why do you want this job? And this is where the person that is interviewing you wants to know that you've looked into the job. Yeah, they want to know that you've looked into the kind of way that they operate, how it ties into who you are, what you are, how you do things, what you're qualified in, all that kind of thing. They want to know that you have looked into the job and you know what you're talking about. Now, in my case, I slipped up on this because I wanted a job because it had a lot more technical stuff than I was doing before, and it got me away from a really miserable boss. There were several other people that were going for it from my department. Only one of us got it when there were 3 positions going, because everyone was just looking to get away from our crappy boss. No one was really going to do the job because of the job. And as a result, most of us just assumed we kind of knew what the job was and all the rest of it, because we worked around that department the whole time. And so as a result, when it actually came to the interview, we didn't know all of the responsibilities. We didn't know all of the other bits and pieces that we need to know. We didn't know how it served the client base in full that we were all serving as a company. It was something that kind of slipped us by. And since then, I've made a point of whenever I've been going into a place, whenever I've been going for an interview, I've been doing an awful lot more research on who they are, who's working for them, how they're working, what clients they serve, and all that kind of thing, just so that I don't slip up on that. Because again, when they say, why do you want this job, it's more a case of how have you interacted with the information behind it, and how do you attach yourself to it. It's knowing that you've done your research, and knowing that as a result of that research you can apply yourself to what they want. So the next one, and this is one that I hear a lot as well, because it's also a question that I ask as a coach and that other coaches ask, and that is, what do you expect to see yourself doing in 5 years' time? Now, here, they're looking for something specific but flexible. Lots of people are kind of like, oh, well, I hope to be more in a more position of greater responsibility, and having opportunities to develop my skills as far as I can. I'm looking to get into a management role by then. And it's like, well, that's great, but that's very vague. Whilst what they're more looking for is by you going, okay, well, I want to take responsibility over time, so by then I'd want to be X type of manager dealing with X type of client, or X type of position in this kind of place. I would like to have moved on to be managing my own store by that point. I would like to have moved on to head office to work specifically with HR, or marketing, or information analysis, or whatever else, data entry. I don't know. I'd like to move up the chain to this specific place, and talk about how you would like to develop to get there. What kind of responsibilities would you like to take on to move yourself in that direction? It's all stuff that you need to be quite specific about. Now, you don't need to be super specific in terms of you want to have numbers attached to it. Like, you don't need to be discussing the pay packet that you want to have. You don't need to be discussing the size of team that you want to be working on. But saying that you want to get to this specific place. I want to be an HR manager at head office in 5 years' time, and I'm hoping that I can gain experience and responsibility through this job to see me moving up into those positions over the next 5 years. That's more of an answer that people are looking for, because again, it's intent, it's specific, it's what they are looking for, and it's focusing on why you're interested in getting there. Yeah, you're going, I want to get there over time because I want to be here in this company because of where I'm getting to in the long run, because of where I want to go in the long run. Which again suggests that you may very well be sticking around for a while, and kind of lower employee turnover and kind of retention of staff is something that is usually seen as a good thing. Now, the next two kind of roll together to an extent, and it's the working with a team thing. In management kind of applications and interviews, it tends to be more of a, okay, so describe a situation in which you led a team, and in kind of more open things that kind of maybe for not as managerial jobs, not as supervisory roles, then it'll be describe a situation where you worked in a team. The way to answer this question is to outline the solution, or outline the situation rather, give an idea of your role, either how you got to lead the team, how you led the team, or what part you took in the overall activity as part of the group, and then kind of the way that the task impacted the group overall, and then the result. It's pretty straightforward. It's just a simple thing, because it allows you to walk through the situation with them. So outline the situation, your role, the overall task, and then the result that you managed. And so it's kind of that rolling cycle between you, the group, and what you managed. So, it's one of these questions that sometimes throws people, because again they don't know what to say. Yeah, like examples could be anything for the one where you've worked on a team, things like group work at universities or previous work placements, sports teams that you've been on, all that kind of thing. But when you've led a team, it's a bit more, they're looking for more specific competencies in regards to things like communication, motivational skills, kind of listening and coordinating and all that kind of thing, but not just shouting people down. That's the one thing that they're definitely not looking for. So the next one, and this is one that actually got pitched at me earlier this week, I think this is the thing that was the problem, but what are your weaknesses? Now, they're not looking for the classic answer anymore. The classic answer used to be a strength which is disguised as a weakness, which is, I'm too much of a perfectionist. Now, we can still use this one, but we need to kind of rework it a little bit, because what they're saying is we want to see a weakness and see how you have improved on it. Don't deny having any weaknesses, because then they just think you're full of shit. But what it comes down to is you turning around and going, okay, so yeah, I'm one of my greatest weaknesses. I'm too much of a perfectionist, and it's tough because it can affect my interactions with the people around me. But I've been taking time and talking to those people and trying to communicate better. And I do it at home with my boyfriend or my girlfriend. They and all they need. I've got to a point now that all they need to do is remind me or point out to me that I may be pushing myself too hard, being too specific in what I want, and then as a result I come back to it. So I've found a way past it. I just sometimes need a little bit of help. That demonstrates that you have identified your weakness, you have been working on it and communicating through it, and you're willing to continue to push forward with it as well. Same with things like self-confidence. Self-confidence is a very very regular weakness that people have, but they don't want to admit to. And so being like, well, I'm not super self-confident at the moment, and I find it very difficult to talk to people that I don't know too well. But as a result of my last job, or as a result of my time at university, I had to deal with certain people with all kinds of different things, and so it became a case of that kind of helped me a lot. And now I'm happy to talk to people one-on-one, but I'm still, like, talking in front of groups is still a bit difficult. But I'm trying to find opportunities to do more presentation work or speak to more people as a group, just so I can push myself through that boundary too. So there it's a case of I'm having a tough time of it. It's not easy for me, but it's something that I've worked on. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for, when there is a problem, you will look to improve, you will look to push past it, to communicate, to deal with it with other people, to find support, to find methods. They're looking for you to problem solve in your own life, so that they can go, okay, well, this person is going to problem solve in our business as well. The next one is kind of, what are your strengths? And this is kind of the flip side of the what are your weaknesses thing that we just talked about. And this is very much a case of going and preparing beforehand, where you've got maybe 3 where you can just go, these are what I'm good at, and then this is how I've used them in the past. So in my case, for instance, like my communication skills, I'm a very capable and able communicator, and I've taken the opportunity to expand on the ways in which I can communicate as a result of doing YouTube and doing a blog and doing presentation work and all that kind of stuff. And in the past, this served me really well when I was having to present to large groups, when I was having to do training with up to 40, 50 people at times, or when I was working in a specific environment that I can't really go into, where I had a very large audience of up to about 500 people that I had to present to at a time. And so it's like they can go, okay, yeah, that's a strength. Now, there are a couple of other ways this could be pitched. One of the other ways is kind of like, how would a friend describe you? How would the people that you've worked with describe you? And here they're looking for, oh, well, those people are going to say nice things about you, right? The other one is, tell me about yourself. And this is the one that I kind of mentioned earlier, where the individual that was interviewing me was not the most professional, because when he said, tell me about yourself, and I was like, right, he wants my strengths and my weaknesses and the things that I've done and all the rest of it. And then he actually wanted to start, he was like, oh, well, that's all very interesting, but I actually kind of wanted to know more about you, about yourself. Like, tell me where you come from. And I was like, okay, well, I can give you a brief synopsis of my existence. So I did. But then he kept probing, and he wanted to know all these kind of things. And he wanted a friend rather than he wanted an employee. He wanted a kind of person that he was like. It was almost mob boss-esque. I want my friend to be in this position so that when something needs to happen, it doesn't matter if they're professional or not or anything else. They will do it for me because they're my friend. And that was a way for me to examine the business I was going into, or the people I was going into that business with, and deciding I didn't want to be there anymore. So this can be a really useful question depending on what they push for when they ask the question. But again, having things that they're looking for, things like teamwork, interpersonal skills, being reliable and dependable, leadership qualities that you have evidence for, all of those things are kind of useful. They are your strengths that you need to have examples of that you can talk through. But again, everyone's got at least some of those things. If you don't think you do, then you're lying to yourself. You've got something. The next one is one that I've heard a few times, when it's like, oh, what was your greatest achievement? And this is the thing where it should relate maybe to your interests, if you have those on your CV, because this is where they're looking for you to be you to be this individual, so that you're not just another candidate to fit into their job role. They're looking for this thing that will make you unique compared to other people. What distinguishes you from everybody else that's come in. And if you can demonstrate that you, through doing this, have evidence of other skills that you can apply to your job, that's great. But if you're talking about stuff that has been an achievement, then it's stuff that in theory you've worked hard at. Was it learning another language in your own time? Was it training and completing a marathon? Was it doing something like Duke of Edinburgh or World Challenge? Was it organising events of some sort as a hobby? Anything like that shows things like organisational skills, team working skills, taking initiative, good communication, determination and focus on a goal. Those are the things that, again, if you can bring them out and put them out on the table in front of you and go, this is what makes me awesome because of what I do outside of work, that I can then also bring into your environment, that's something that's probably going to sway people a lot more than just going, oh, my greatest achievement, well, I went and shoveled 500 small sugary objects into my mouth in one time and at one point, and it was awesome. Like, even if it got you into the Guinness Book of World Records, that's something that probably wouldn't impress all that many people by comparison to some of the other people, considering that there probably wouldn't be an awful lot of communication, an awful lot of training, and an awful lot of teamwork and other things in there that they're looking for in such an achievement. The next one is the I've heard this in a couple of different ways. where they'll look at your educational history and they'll go, okay, so why did you choose your university? Or it'll be, why did you choose to pursue that qualification? And a lot of the time, it doesn't really matter why, or what it is really. Um, but more often than not, they're looking for evidence of you planning, of you being logical in the way that you've decided to choose, and in regards to your decision making skills, like how focused were you? Like if you say, oh well, it just seemed like the easiest subject at the time, and I felt like I needed to go and get some kind of further educational degree or something like that, then that's why I went. That's not an answer that they're going to be interested in, because it doesn't really show you having much in the way of logical reasoning as to why you followed that particular path. Your planning was, well, I felt I needed something, so I went and did it, which isn't really much of a plan. And you made a decision based on not very much. When it comes to kind of my examples, if someone asked me why I decided to go and do my coaching qualifications, then I'd be like, well, I was in a situation where I was basically doing the job of a coach anyway, and after taking about a year whilst I was still in a job to work things out, to go over stuff, to get onto the course and start working through it, it seemed like the next logical step for me with my skills and the things that I wanted in life to progress. It was somewhere where I could go, okay, so this opportunity has been put in front of me. I can plan as effectively as possible around it, but more to the point, it seems to be that I'm already doing this, and this makes it more formal, so I can make that step fairly easily when I already have all this understanding and all this capability, without too much friction. In which case, again, they're seeing my planning for the situation, the reason why I made the decision in the first place, and the fact that there is a logical progression in what I'm saying there. Now, the last one, I think this is the last one. Yes, this is the last one. Is who else have you applied to, or who else have you got interviews with? Now, this is one that I've only had a couple of times in the interviews that I've had, and I've never asked it as an interviewer, just because in a lot of the instances where I've been interviewing people, it's just not really been all that relevant. But the things that they are looking for is whether or not you're consistent in what you're looking for, whether or not you're very interested in the area that they're in, or if this is kind of tangential, and whether or not the one that you are in the interview for at the time is your first choice. In which case, the other places that you maybe want to give examples of are things that are relevant, i.e. businesses that are very similar, ones that are big names, because then they'll be easily recognised, and it'll be like, oh, well, if we like this person, we're going to want to keep hold of them, because otherwise they'll go over to that big competitor. Again, you want to be consistent in terms of saying, well, look, there's I've gone for the same kind of job in all these places. Even if you've applied for loads of jobs in different places that are all kinds of different things, cherry pick. Try and match them up so that you are kind of on that same level. And then, it's if you've got interviews with other places, maybe list those. I've got another interview later this week with so and so, and I've got an interview beginning of next week with this other place. So yeah, I'm glad that maybe saying that you're glad that you got that one first would be maybe a little bit sucking up to your interviewer, but it might be worth saying if that is actually the place that you want to be. But don't list the ones that have rejected you. Don't list the ones you haven't heard back from. Because obviously then that's going to plant seeds of doubt in the interviewer's mind as to, oh, well, if that place hasn't got back to them, then what's wrong with them? What is it that I've not spotted that they have from their initial application? And that's something you want to avoid. Those kind of seeds of doubt being planted are things that you want to kind of steer clear of. But anyway, guys, that's it's effectively 10 questions, but that's essentially 9 points that we've been through there, plus the preamble of of stuff to prepare and way that you should really communicate in an interview, way that you should present yourself. Like, you can turn up to an interview in a t-shirt and jeans and maybe a jacket of some sort, and depending on the job, especially as long as you're clean and you're looking good and it's all your clothes are kind of at least as they would expect to be, not stained, not ripped, not unless they're specifically ripped jeans, but why would you wear those in the first place? They're a mystery to me. But all of those things, as long as you've got those lining up in that way, then you can be presentable. It's much more about making sure that you're clean and your clothes are in good order, as well as you kind of walking in with that sense of confidence and purpose, than otherwise. So if you really don't have a suit, don't have the money for a suit and all the rest of it, and you're going to a job interview, they may ask you as to why, but you know that you can always try and explain. You know, especially if you're a poor student and you're away from home, then I'm sure they will be much more understanding if you are actually kind of within the realm of what they are looking for. But otherwise, it's a case of kind of trying to take it in your stride, trying to make it all work, and you know, I would always suggest having like some smarter trousers, even if it's smart jeans that are all a uniform colour and unripped, and probably a button-down shirt for guys. Girls obviously have much more breadth in what they can blag as being more kind of formal or business wear. So, you know, I can't say I've ever dressed up as a woman for an interview, so I'll leave that to their discretion. But otherwise, guys, I hope this is useful, because especially after some of the conversations I've been having in the last like few days, like interviews can be difficult. Like, as I've said, I've slipped up in them, or I've come across ones that the people that were interviewing me just really didn't seem to be kind of on the level at all. And so it's a case of it's this big hurdle to get into a job that can be a real pain in the arse, especially when the person who's interviewing you is either unhelpful or if you don't know really what they're asking you. And so this is why I wanted to go through these questions. If you've got any other questions that you've been asked during an interview, leave them down in the comments below, and maybe I'll put another video together addressing some of those if I've not already covered them. But otherwise, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you find this useful. I wish you the best of luck in finding jobs if you're looking for them. And otherwise, I will see you in the video later. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you found this useful. And if you did, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you in the video later. Take care.